Do you like dogs? I do too. That's why today's episode is brought to you by BarkBox.com. Get one free extra month of BarkBox at www.getbarkbox.com/paratruth.
Christian and non-Christian paranormal investigators. They have two different views, and it seems as if neither of them can ever agree on anything. So what happens when a mainstream view of the paranormal crosses paths with the Christian view? Something epic. This is Paratruth Radio.
How's it going, Paratruthers? Welcome to a brand new episode of Paratruth Radio. My name is Justin. I hope everybody had a safe and happy Thanksgiving. I hope nobody got killed or tried to kill somebody over the Black Friday sales. And I hope everybody is doing well this day. So I have a great show for you guys. A lot of people have thrown out different theories about ghosts. And my guest tonight has put a new spin on ghost theory. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, for those of you listening at TMV Cafe, Fringe Radio Network, Paranormal UK Radio Network, and paratruthradio.com, let's get ready to expose some lies. Brandon Massullo is a clinic therapist and parapsychologist residing in Medina, Ohio. Fascinated by paranormal phenomena for more than 20 years, Massullo has been a featured speaker at numerous paranormal forums and events. He studied psychology and parapsychology at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. His research has been cited in numerous parapsychological journals, articles, and mainstream books. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my guest, Brandon Massullo. Brandon, welcome to Paratruth Radio. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing great. How about yourself, Justin?
Doing really well. Love doing this show and meeting new people. As I just had said to you off air, you're in Medina, Ohio, and I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, so it's not that far of a hop, skip, and a jump away from where I was living at one point. But before we get started, I wanted to tell everybody, or have you tell everybody a little bit about what got you into the paranormal and what prompted you to do the book, The Ghost Studies.
Sure. So, what prompted me to get into it? Well, I probably when I was in my teenage years, I had a friend who witnessed an apparition. We were over a friend's house, and I didn't witness it, but he did. And he came and started talking to me and asking me questions like, what is a ghost? What causes a ghost? And, I didn't have the answers to that, so I just I ended up going to the library, picking up a book on parapsychology, and sort of fell in love with parapsychology and, grabbed all the information I could about it, read all the books. And then at one point I was like, I'd really like to study this. So I ended up studying just psychology, did that for a while, got my master's degree, was doing clinical counseling. And then I went to overseas to Scotland and studied parapsychology over there, which, parapsychology is essentially the study of everything paranormal, if you want to think about it like that. They look into ghosts, telepathy, psi, ESP,
right,
that type of thing. So I was always a fan of ghosts. I was always sort of interested in them. I never had a personal experience as a young child, and I still really haven't seen a full body apparition. So I don't have really a cool story about a haunting or growing up in a haunted place. I just really wanted to know the answers to what causes these type of phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And then, just pick up a book, and the next thing you know, it's 10 years later, and I'm in Scotland studying parapsychology. It just sort of happens that way.
Well, the one thing that I actually respected after starting to read the book and everything, and you say that, you've never been on a ghost investigation or ghost hunt, quote unquote, if you will. And, there's a lot of these TV shows that are doing these things now and bringing it to mainstream media. And nobody, even though they do research on the locations that they go and do the ghost hunt on or whatever, nobody really studies enough to say we've found what ghosts really are or what these different phenomena are. So I think that it's an interesting way to go about it because you didn't get into the ghost hunting. Was it just it never prompted in you or never rose to the occasion that you had to do that? Or
when I grew up, there wasn't I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I'm about 38 years old. So when I grew up, there was no shows on TV. We had Unsolved Mysteries.
Right.
But nothing like Ghost Hunters or anything like that. So, I never really watched a lot of the reality television shows until I was sort of, already in college. And at that point, I investigations and ghost hunts. I've never been part of a paranormal team, though.
Okay.
So I've been to haunted locations. I've held. I've been with. I usually go with teams. Invite me to go, just because I really want to know what goes on in these investigations.
Mm-hmm.
So I never been on a team, but I've been to a lot of these haunted locations in my life, and being on a team could be a little bit complicated. I talk to a lot of people who do this on I would call it like a full-time basis because it's almost every weekend.
Right.
They're so passionate and they're so involved and they love going out to these haunted locations and they love, just talking with people. And I'm really envious of that. But I think you're right on the other end of that. You spend so much time doing that. I think it's beneficial if you want to be, a serious investigator to parapsychology and his theories, a little bit about why the EMF meters are used, why is electricity important, and just, kind of look into some of the research. And when I say research, I mean journal articles and, books about why that's there. At that, you learn to appreciate these paranormal investigations a lot more, rather than just sitting in a room with an EVP or with a voice recorder trying to catch an EVP.
Right.
You can know a little bit more about what's going on around you. And that makes the investigation interesting. And that's kind of one of the things that made me want to write the book was, I got all this information and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if it was just all put in one book, all the EMF, all the electricity, all that stuff,
right? So
someone can just kind of pick it up and get that information right away. That's kind of a double answer there, but that's one of I answered your previous question. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book.
So one chapter in it is energy, electricity, and apparitions. And I had a paranormal investigation team with my cousin Eric, who is my co-host, when I was still living in Cleveland. And one of the things that you learn as a ghost hunter is that if there's high EMF, it's possibility of a spirit or ghost or something of that nature being around, but you also have to rule out EMF from electronics, bad wiring. What in your research did you come across that is it something that ghosts need to feed off of, electrical fields or something like that, or is it maybe the electrical fields that are playing with people's minds, like a lot of ghost hunters have said? High EMF can make people see and hear things almost like there is a haunting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question because that's really the ultimate debate. Are EMFs or these electromagnetic fields in the environment in a way messing with our brains or causing us to see ghosts? Or, like you said, is it do ghosts manipulate the electromagnetic fields to manifest themselves? So you really, and if you have to look at it from both sides almost simultaneously at one point. So what did I find out, right? Well, I didn't answer that question too well. What I did find out was it's kind of based on your perception. So obviously, there's a lot of research out there from Michael Persinger, who is the neuropsychologist who sort of invented the God helmet, and did a lot of research on that. And he proved that, if there's very complex or erratic electromagnetic fields at pretty normal frequencies in strength environment, it can cause us to have see ghostly sense of presence or see apparitions. I've paranormal conferences and listened to investigators speak, and usually every team has that story, right? I went in and there was a small child who was having all these, who was seeing ghosts at night, and then we removed the clock, and we found out through our EMFs that the clock was giving off high EMFs. We removed it, and then the phenomenon went away. Have you heard stories like that going through?
Yeah, a little bit here and there.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's a clock, sometimes it's a fan, sometimes their bed was located near a fuse box or something like that. And then once they determine that, then then the phenomenon go away. But then on the other hand, there's a lot of investigators who really swear by the idea that if you have an electromagnetic field or you have an EMF meter and it's the EMF meter is going off or having activity, and you can't find a natural explanation for it, or if it sort of moves around like a person, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So if you get a high EMF meter near a washing machine, you could probably say, oh, that's a washing machine,
right? Yeah.
Or a dishwasher. Sorry, but if this EMF is sort of following somebody around or moving through the house, then you can't really come up with too much of an explanation behind that. And then that kind of leads to this idea where it could be a ghost. So what I talk about in there is I kind of look at different perspectives from each side, and then I kind of go over, is there a specific measurement that indicates the presence of a ghost? Actually, there's not. So, the more I talk to people in paranormal teams, I'm like, well, so you say there's activity. Why? Why? Explain why. And everyone has a different answer for that. Generally, they say it's around 2 milligauss and 7 milligauss if the EMF is fluctuating and moving around the house. But there's no on that either. My thoughts in the end are, I do think energy and electricity play a role in ghostly phenomenon, but it's so challenging because, the EMF meters, they're really not as people think they are. Not even really taking into account a lot of times geomagnetic field. So you're really just surface as far as detecting actual with most meters that we have. I mean, the K2 meter, I don't want to say worthless, but it's not picking up a lot. You're not getting accurate information with that meter.
Yeah, I had a K2, and it seemed like it was almost too sensitive. Like it would probably be picking up some type of electronics or something rather than, say, a spirit. And unfortunately, I didn't have the money to get anything better than that, so it was one of those things.
And that's kind of it's an expensive field to get into.
Yeah.
I mean, with the cameras, the FLIR, the recordings, and the EMF meters, now it's getting more and more high tech as we get further into the ghost hunting field. But so that's a good point, though. I mean, it's like it's picking up something, but I'm not sure what it's picking up, so I can't really. It's what I'm saying. I don't know.
Right.
So you really have to go by what your experience is, and if everyone used the same meter, then we would have a better idea of kind of what we're looking at. But everyone uses a different meter. Some are using K2, some are using the tri-field meters. There's probably 30 different other EMF meters out there.
Right.
And they're all different. Some are single axis meters, some are triple axis meters, so you don't really know consistently what you're getting. So there's really no consistency in the research out there as far as paranormal investigations with teams.
Well, and a lot of people will say, well, we're being scientific about it. Well, science wants you to what's the best wording? Reenact, I guess, the same thing several times to get a proper hypothesis of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And as you're saying, without people using the same EMF, same area, same time, you're not recreating that
exactly.
area.
And when I did my research in the University of Edinburgh, I did it at a place called the Mary King's Close, which is it's pretty popular in the UK. All the shows have been there, the Ghost Hunters and all that.
Okay.
But what I had to do was I had to take baseline readings every morning. So I had to go I think it was in the morning or afternoon. I ran the study over 5 days, so I had to go every morning before the participants got there, and I had to do baseline EMF readings. So, you get this baseline reading, and then if there's any variations from that, that's where you really look at what's going on. And you use the same EMF meter every time, same location every time, and you do this for 5-6 days. It's boring and tedious,
right?
But then, like you said, you get this idea of, well, there is an aberration in this. This wasn't there for the last 6 days. What's happening now that's making this aberration? And in the field, it's like you go out one night, you investigate a house for 8 hours or a location for 8 hours. It's tough to go before, get baseline readings. So it's really challenging to do that. And I understand why paranormal investigators don't do that. But, I think it's important, the consistency, the reliability, all that stuff's pretty important when you want to show your data or your evidence. So I have a blog sometimes, and I'll talk about kind of what could help move the field forward. And I think that's one of the things we have to do is there has to be consistency. Like we should be giving the same questionnaires to everybody. We should have the same investigation protocols. And I think this has been preached before, but it's challenging to do when there's over, 1,000 paranormal teams out there all doing their own thing.
Right, yeah. You would have to turn it into an actual career-type field in order to do that.
Exactly.
So one thing that you had just mentioned a little bit ago is that the technology is just building and building. In your opinion, and I can voice my opinion on this too, but in your opinion, do you think that the technology is increasing our ability to come to that final answer, or do you think it's kind of hindering us?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Personally, I think it really hinders us in a way.
Okay.
I really believe that getting the readings of the environment is important.
Right.
But I think it's gone a little haywire, with all these. I don't even know what to call them. There's like teddy bears with EMF stuff around them, static pods. It seems like every week there's a new sort of doohickey out there that, I think people are getting too tech focused. You can get the environmental readings, but again, it's important. I think the human experience is very, very important when it comes to a haunting or ghostly encounters at any kind or any rate.
Right.
Getting a good eyewitness account of what's going on. Just going out into the environment, and I think that's really, really important. Some of the best ghost hunters in history really didn't have any equipment with them. I mean, you go back to the 70s, and prior to that, really there was no equipment there.
Right.
Nowadays, it's all equipment and very little, research and that type of thing. So it's kind of shifted. You rely more on the equipment and less on, your knowledge or your base knowledge or your education. So it does hinder it a little bit. But man, those things are cool looking though. I tell you what, you know what I'm saying? Like I get sucked in too. I'm like, because I go to these conferences and when I do the speakings, and I'll be there and I'll go around to some of the tables, and these people, like some of the stuff out there, it's like amazing, the electronics in there and what it's, but I get it. I get why you want to take that stuff out into the field. I just saw one of the ones with the Xbox Kinect. It almost shows like little stick figures out into the. I don't know how to describe it, but it was a pretty cool piece of tech.
Well, the one thing that I had gotten an Xbox One, and the one thing that I had found interesting with the Kinect is it will do night vision and it will also do thermal imaging. And I'm like, you could bring this on a ghost hunt and not need any other cameras with you.
And you can get the Kinect for like $10.
Right.
It's not that nobody uses it anymore to play games with.
Well, and, I do agree with you. I think we're getting away from the human aspect of it for two reasons. One, when you do an investigation and you bring evidence to the table for your client, you tell them your personal experiences, but you say, now this was just a personal experience. We can't give it to you as evidence. And it's like, I feel that personal experience is just as much evidence. I mean, some of the weirdest court cases have been on nothing more than circumstantial evidence that people have seen or heard. And it's just like, so, and I do agree that these electronics are pretty amazing and awesome, but it's almost like each team is trying to one-up each other. I've got the new big thing. Well, look at this. This is the new big thing. And it's like, it's become a competition. And it's like, I think we've gotten away from what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people. We're not trying to just say, oh, hey, yeah, you have a ghost. See you later. Bye. And I think that's what the personal aspect gets into is, well, we can look into this. Here you have a child sleeping next to an electronic alarm clock. Let's remove that and see what happens. Like you had said.
Exactly, and that's a completely plausible way to utilize an EMF meter. When people buy houses and they have people come in and do inspections, I've noticed more and more companies now will offer that EMF assessment of a house before someone buys it.
Okay.
So that's a completely reasonable thing to do because obviously the research out there is sort of sketchy on the effects of EMF, at least low level EMFs on biology. But hey, you're sleeping next to a fuse box and you got 1,000 milligauss in your head, and you do that for 3 years, you're going to have some probably effects from that.
Right.
So I think it's a good idea to make sure you're not just bombarded with high levels of EMF.
Right.
So that's a completely reasonable thing to use an EMF meter for. But like you said, when you sit people down, I think you're right. I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure for people to point to some concrete evidence that something is going on. So obviously experiences, personal, are subjective, if you want to think of it like that. So it's just my experience. It's what I witnessed. But an EMF meter is concrete and objective. So I have a piece of equipment that gives me a number. So people think, well, that's more validity that a paranormal thing is going on. But I think you're right. I think it's almost in a way opposite of that. In parapsychology and a lot of the research out there, there's way more spontaneous cases of ghostly encounters, and that's just subjective witness.
Right.
Right. Than there is haunted reports of hauntings. So, there's all these books out there with millions of spontaneous cases of crisis apparitions and deathbed apparitions that could be validated. I am, and I saw my mom to me, and then I got a phone. Died at 2 a.m.
Right.
That could be validated, and I think that's the biggest evidence of the validity of ghostly encounters.
Okay, so one of the other chapters in the book kind of sparked my attention, and that was ghostly ingredients theory. So can you tell us a little bit about ghostly ingredients theory?
Yeah, sure. So in the book, I go over two new and fresh ideas or theories on ghosts. And one of the theories that I go over is called ghostly ingredients theory. So ghostly ingredients theory has to do with, it doesn't really answer questions as far as hauntings go. So this is your residual hauntings and locations.
Mm-hmm.
This more has to do with what happens during crisis apparitions or deathbed visions. And this is, we talked a little bit about this before. This is when one-time cases of spontaneous ghostly encounters. So, waking up one night and seeing, your friend standing in front of you, maybe covered in blood and saying help. And then, you see this visual apparition and you hear him. And then the next day you find out that your friend was in a car accident and that he died. So the ghostly ingredients theory sort of goes along the lines of maybe explaining a little bit about what happens during these types of ghostly encounters. And I think these are great. What's great about spontaneous cases is it gives you a nice, fresh look at these types of ghostly encounters, because usually these people have these encounters one time in their lives, maybe a couple times, but they're not really looking for it. It just sort of happens to them. So, if you go to a haunted location, you might be sort of primed to see a ghost. You know what I'm saying? Did you walk in there, ready to see ghosts and do that type of thing? But what ghostly ingredients basically says is there's sort of a series of complex processes that happen to cause a ghostly encounter. And the first part of that has to do with psychological aspects. So you have this life-threatening event, which is the psychological aspects, that cause all kinds of emotional shifts inside us. So this causes this life-threatening or traumatic event causes all kinds of changes internally. And the next step is the bioenergetic changes. So as you know, we're all sort of electrical beings.
Right.
We're there, EKGs, EEGs. These are all medical pieces of equipment which really sort of gauge the electricity in our bodies. But what we don't realize is that when we have these traumatic events, these life-threatening events such as death or dying or car accidents, emotions could also cause changes internally for us, and that has to do with our energy levels or our bioenergetics or the electricity in our bodies. So you have a life-threatening event plus the bioenergetic changes inside us. That all those changes inside us sort of trigger what I like to call external information acquisition. So, but what basically that means is changes inside us seep out into the environment, and then once these electromagnetic fields inside us seep out into the environment, it kind of resonates with somebody across the continent or miles and miles away, and then that sort of gives us our paranormal, our ghostly encounter. So when I go through this, it sounds like a lot, but it's actually pretty simple. You have psychological aspects plus bioenergetic aspects equals or plus external information acquisition equals paranormal experience.
Okay.
It's really a simple equation to crisis apparitions and deathbed visions. In the book, I go over a lot of case examples to it, and I really discuss a little bit about how the environment plays a role in ghostly phenomenon, the role that we've all heard of imprint theory, sort of the encounters being burned into the environment. So the book itself goes into a lot about what happens on that. And ghostly ingredients theory is basically a glimpse into the phenomenon of apparitions. It's the idea that telepathy, ESP, communication at a distance are possible causes for apparition and haunt-type phenomenon. And what it really looks at is sort of how all this stuff combines to have a crisis or deathbed apparition. In the book, I really break it down very, 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 very easy to understand. It's tough to really encapsulate ghostly ingredients theory in a soundbite, I found.
Right, yeah.
Over the last 2 months. Although I've tried. It's a little bit more complex than just one thing happening. So it's not just like survival after death or something like that. It's a whole complex process that happens that really leads us to this idea of apparitions happening.
Right. Well, that kind of leads into the chapter on your hypothesis, and I found this like super fascinating that, a lot of people will say it's the electromagnetic imprint if it's a non-intelligent haunting or a repeat haunting, if you will. And your hypothesis with the telepathic imprint actually made a lot more sense. Even though I know that we're bioelectricity, and once you die, that a bioelectricity can't go anywhere, so it's possible that we could leave an imprint instead of us just being there. But the telepathic imprint, I don't know why, it just rang more to me than the electromagnetic imprint. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so exactly. So this idea of I call it like a telepathic distress signal is what I call it.
Okay.
And I think that there's this idea that I'll backtrack a little bit and then I'll get to answer the question.
Okay.
So the popular idea is that stone tape theory and imprint theory, which states that the environment holds the memory of a past event, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we come into, there's a tragic event that happens, like a death of a Civil War soldier or something like that, that the energy from that death is burned into the environment, and then people who come to that environment sort of see, feel, hear, taste, and this is where a ghostly phenomenon happens. That's the imprint theory in a way. And this is used often to explain these residual hauntings. So this is what you said was, the ghost is not really conscious. It's more like a recording in a way. Yeah. So, but there's no specific explanation or mechanism for how this happens. Like you said, it's sort of like the bioenergy is sort of just burned into the environment.
Right.
But I always found that there's flaws with this theory. In other words, the tragic event or violent death must have occurred at a location for a haunting or a haunt-type phenomenon to occur. So when you say that, it means that a location, therefore, if a location doesn't have this violent history, nothing could be burned or imprinted into the environment,
right,
which sort of limits a haunting to one particular location. So unlike place or imprint theory, I don't believe that this event or violent death is what causes an imprint into the environment, but it's this telepathic distress message that an individual sends during a pretty intense traumatic event or violent death, which is sort of imprinted into the environment. So the actual name of the theory I have is called spontaneous apparitional trace theory. Okay. And it sort of says that in every haunted location there was an individual who sent a telepathic distress call to someone who they're kind of emotionally linked with, that's been stuck at that location. So it's this telepathic distress call that is what sensitives and ghost hunters are encountering. And I think this can account for a great deal of these recurrent apparitions and hauntings. So again, in my theory, a haunting doesn't have to coincide with the location of a tragic event, but it could also be at the destination or the end point of the telepathic message. So, I know some of your listeners we all hear the word telepathy, and it's something we all sort of feel like we know.
Right, yeah.
And, but I'll be honest, when I started actually reading about telepathy, I was like, oh my God, that's not how I defined it.
Right.
But telepathy is basically just communication of impressions of any kind from one mind to another. But what we don't think about with telepathy, we think, you go in one room, I go in another, and then you think of a number, and then I read your mind.
Right, or we're talking to each other without moving our lips.
Exactly. But telepathy goes a lot farther than that. It's actually, it could be visual. It could be auditory. You could hear things. Sense of presence, that's another thing that can happen. There's this idea where, you're in one location, and then all of a sudden you get a burning sensation in your arm, and you find out later that your wife who is states away, actually burned her arm cooking or something like that. So she, in a way, communicated her distress to you miles and miles away through a feeling in your arm. So this idea of communicating at a distance is it's been going on for a long period of time. And usually when people are in distress is when this actually occurs. But, my theory basically says that, it's this distress signal that's sent when somebody is, dying or in a life-threatening situation is sort of burned into the environment at the location, but also at the end point of that as well.
Well, I think that's kind of why it jives better with me, because it doesn't necessarily mean that person died. There was just a traumatic event that they were like, oh my God, I'm going to die, or there's something going really wrong here, and sent out what, like you said, the distress signals trying to get help.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times, when you go in investigating houses, you'll go to a place and, the house could be, a year old, and then the investigator's like, oh, you can't have a ghost here. This house is brand new.
Right.
Well, in my theory, it can.
Right.
It doesn't matter. The house could be 2 days old or 300 years old. It doesn't really matter.
The land has been there way longer than the house has been.
Yeah, and, just because a death didn't occur there, that doesn't mean that, it could be the end point of the telepathic distress signal.
Oh, right,
So if you have a Civil War soldier that died in Gettysburg who, was going through a death and, communicated to his mom in Montana, right?
Mm-hmm.
She got this telepathic distress signal, and she woke up one night, saw a vision of her son in Civil War uniform covered in blood in Montana. And let's say you're a paranormal investigator, and you're investigating in Montana, and you come across, an EVP of a soldier saying, tell my mom I love her, and a visual apparition of a Civil War soldier covered in blood. You might say to yourself, why am I picking up evidence like this in Montana? Because I don't think there was any Civil War soldiers or.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I don't think, but what you are picking up is what his mother was receiving from this soldier way back in 1830 or whenever the Civil War was, 1863. So the phenomenon or the ghostly experiences can happen at the location, which is Gettysburg, but could also happen at the destination of this telepathic distress signal, which is Montana. So that's kind of a cool part of the theory as well. It can explain a lot of the. It actually fills the holes for a lot of the flaws in some of the theories that are out there right now.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because, like you said, I don't think that the Civil War there was any fighting in Montana, but very valid point. One thing that comes to mind is a previous guest of ours had said, there's a lot of people that talk about ghosts where it's just the legs now, or it seems like the spirit is disappearing because it's only half of the person or something, and that maybe spirits are slowly fading away over time because the energy is dissipating or what have you. Have you done any studies on that where the apparitions are just gradually fading away or anything like that?
No, I've never actually. That's the first I've heard of something like that. I always, I really even know how to answer that.
Well, what he had
you.
compared it to is kind of like I forget the movie that he had mentioned, but there was a movie that was made that it was an English movie, I believe, that these scientists went in using sound waves, and that spirits are actually made of sound waves. And when you see a half-body apparition or whatever, it's actually the body or the spirit is dissipating because those sound waves are eventually evaporating and dissipating throughout the environment. One theory that I had also come across listening to somebody else's podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is we think of time as linear, but there are many cultures and religions that believe that time is happening, past, present, and future, all at the same time, and that they're all converging, and that maybe that's where ghosts are coming from. What are your thoughts on that? That we're seeing into the past or seeing into the future.
Yeah. That's sort of that idea of multiple dimensions or string theory.
Right.
Is that, yeah. I tell you what, I've read a lot about that, and this quantum physics, and it's really it's a rabbit hole to go down for sure.
Yeah.
I think that that's definitely a plausible explanation for a lot of things that happen. So in other words, you just sort of you glimpse into another dimension or another part of time. I think that could probably account for some things, but I am nowhere near knowledgeable on anything with physics to even comment really intelligently on that.
That's okay.
I think because there's a lot of books out there that really go into that, and I'll be honest with you, I'm more of a proponent that maybe I don't think it's that complicated.
Okay.
If you want to think about quantum physics and mechanics, I don't think it's that complicated.
Right.
I think it's just there's the Earth's atmosphere has the capability of storing a lot of energy out there.
Mm.
Michael Persinger says it has enough energy in the Earth's atmosphere to store basically all the memories of everybody who's ever lived, right?
Mm.
So if that's possible, then maybe at some point we're just sort of resonating or connecting with this type of thing in the environment. I really think it's as simple as just sort of almost like a radio antenna. All this stuff is out there. Just at some point, when certain situations line up, we just sort of connect with it, right?
Right.
I think it's as simple as that, and that's when we have these experiences. So I read about all that, the quantum physics, and I'll be honest with you, I really think that sometimes that takes out the human experience, and I really just believe that I would never discount it saying it doesn't happen, but I more of the proponent, like I talked about us just connecting with something in the environment.
Right. Well, just like any other science, we're trying to explain something that we can't explain. So quantum physics falls right into that as well. We're trying to say that, and one thing that I have found fascinating in the past couple of years is quantum physicists are now saying that there is more proof that this is more of an intelligent design than it's not, than just the Big Bang Theory and poof, here we were.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Because my big thing is like consciousness. Neuropsychology and physics and all that. 10 to 15 years ago, if you said, consciousness, sort of our self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
If you said it lied outside of our brain, you were laughed at and your tomatoes were thrown at you.
Right.
So the idea has always been that consciousness is somehow a physical part of our brain, like you could open your head up and find consciousness. But the fact of the matter is they haven't found it.
Right. Yeah. Nobody can say here they're in the brain right there.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
Yeah, and now you get more people who are thinking outside the box, and saying, consciousness may not just be a physical part of our brain. It may lay outside of ourselves. And if consciousness or self-awareness is not a physical location in our brain and it's outside of us, that helps explain a lot of things, from near-death experiences. It could also go on to explain, telepathy. It could explain apparitions to some degree. It could explain numerous other psi phenomenon as well.
Mm.
So I think that as things progress here, we're getting maybe more and more people in academia who are willing to say, let's go down this road rather than let's just shut this thing completely off. That Rupert Sheldrake has been preaching this idea of consciousness being outside of our brains since the mid-'80s, I think. And now people are actually starting to listen to him. So it took him over 30 years, but And I think that's good that these young scientists are taking into account these alternative thoughts about what's happening. So if there's a breakthrough in there, there's a breakthrough with parapsychology, ghosts, apparitions, all this stuff.
Right, and I agree. I think that we tend to fluff off some parts of things to explain things, but then cling to others. And it's like, no, guys, you have to embrace all of it or none of it, because if you don't embrace all of it or at least consider all of it, then it's like you're not going to get the explanation that you're looking for. So
exactly, yeah, exactly. And when it comes to ghosts too, there really probably isn't one theory that's 100% true.
Right.
You know, it could. Let's say my theories would account for maybe 30% of ghostly encounters. Maybe earthbound spirits, survival after death can account for 15%. Maybe EMFs messing with the brain, causing us to believe we see ghosts, can be 20%, and maybe multi-universe could be 5%. You know what I'm saying? So to say it's just one theory, obviously there's different. If you see an apparition, it could be a hallucination, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Well, or it could be this, or it could be that.
It's the same thing with like sleep paralysis, for example. Even though you're technically awake, your body's not realizing you're awake. And then people have debated from as far back as this phenomenon has been studied and chronicled that, maybe it's more a spiritual attack or something like that, and that's why you're seeing these different things. And then there's other people that say, no, you're just hallucinating because you were dreaming, and then all of a sudden you're awake, and what was in your dream is now in front of you. And yep. I think that it can be both, and a lot of people will say, no, it has to be one or the other. And I'm like, no, it's the same thing with my co-host, Eric. He comes from a strict Christian perspective on a lot of these things, and a lot of the stuff that him and I will disagree on is he believes ghosts and spirits are have to be demons because the Bible says they're demons, where I say, okay, I respect that and I can see that, but I also think that there's more to it. I think that human spirits can still be here. And if you can't wrap your mind around both aspects, or at least be like, well, I respect your opinion, but I don't agree with you, and just want to argue, that's where we're coming into problems. Yeah,
exactly. You have these very steadfast believers that everything is paranormal and everything is a spirit or a ghost or a demon.
Right.
And then on the opposite end of that, you have these steadfast skeptics who discount everything to being, hallucinations or sleep paralysis or EMF, whatever they want to say.
Right.
Having an open mind and being in the middle is probably the best place to be. Because I tell you what, it's easy to be a steadfast or ardent skeptic. I mean, it's really easy to do that. And it's really easy to be a steadfast believer. Those are easy. Opposite ends are easy. It's being in the middle when you take both sides and you learn about, what's going on in mainstream science to account for these apparitions. And then also learning about, well, what are some alternative theories and thoughts? It takes a lot of work to know both sides. It's easy to only know one side.
Well, the funniest thing is like, take an atheist, for example. They believe that once we die, there's nothing left. And, some of the arguments that I've seen put to these people, and I would even say, well, do you believe in science? And they're like, well, yeah, science is proven. And it's like, well, it is also proven that we are bioelectricity, we are bioenergy, and energy doesn't die, it just transforms. So what is your explanation? Most of the time, it's just them backtracking and trying to basically say, well, no, that's not what I was saying. And that's the end of it. And it's like, okay, guys, we have to stop arguing and be like, we all have to come together on this because it's so much more. Yeah. So the final chapter is entitled "Not Everything is Paranormal," and I love that you put that in the book, because a lot of times, like you just said, you either hop to one side or the other. Either it's paranormal or it's not. And most people that hop to, oh, that's paranormal, haven't done the research, or they get the EMF and don't try and track it down and that sort of thing. So I do appreciate that. But tell us a little bit about that chapter.
Well, yeah, so that was one chapter that I felt was pretty important for the book. And I think it's an important chapter just to say, you know what, hey, rule out some things before you go ultimately towards it is paranormal or that. But what's great about that chapter is I go over everything from, you know, what does mainstream science say is going on? You know, there's things called reality testing deficits. There's a lot of things in there that have to do with mental illness and paranormal phenomenon. And I do a case study with someone who has schizophrenia and how that could be viewed as someone who is possessed. And it's kind of a cool case study in that you look at there's a person, I give a case study of what's going on with them, and then there's a demonologist. I took it from sort of an experience I had with the demonologist, and then I kind of look at, well, let's take a step back and look at this from a mental health perspective. And you can see how this person was probably not possessed, but instead suffering from schizophrenia. I also go over how some people, you know, will use paranormal phenomenon to cope with losses in their lives, and you know, all the most recent up-to-date research on some things, research out there that says, you know, this isn't paranormal, this is a psychological thing, or this is interpreting the environment differently. And so there's all kinds of things in that chapter, and there's a little bit about fraud and things like that as well. I think it's a nice rounded approach, and I think it really helps people understand that there are some people with certain personality types that are sometimes more prone to fantasy, or sometimes their brain gets tricked a little bit better than everybody else's. And that doesn't mean they're, you know, not as good as everybody else, but I think it's something to really look at this research out there that mainstream science has done and say, you know, they put a lot of effort into it. There's probably some truth to it. Don't just poo-poo it all. Just get a better understanding of it. And that's the last chapter. I don't know how many pages it is, but it's a pretty concise chapter, and I think it really gives people a well-rounded look at ghostly encounters.
Well, I think the whole book does that, so I do appreciate you coming out with it. Most important question of the night, where can everybody find you and find the book?
Well, you can find me. I do have a website with a blog. It's called hauntedtheories.com. That's hauntedtheories.com. I go over a little bit about my theories in there, so if you're like me and you understand things better by reading rather than listening, that's a good place to go. I'm on Facebook at Haunted Theories. Twitter is at Haunted Theories. The book is available at Amazon. You can also get it at Barnes & Noble if you like to actually go into brick-and-mortar stores and pick it up. So those would be the two places that I would get it from, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And that's pretty much it. The website gives you all the information about where I'm going to be, what I'm doing, some of my thoughts on all the theories. And if you ever want to contact me, Twitter, Facebook, and then my website is the best way to do that.
All right, Brandon. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming to talk to me. I want you to stay on the line. But, folks, you've been listening to Paratruth Radio. I've been talking to Brandon Massullo about the book, The Ghost Studies, and we will be right back after this break. Hey, Parafans, do I have a deal for you? The people over at Loot Crate are giving our listeners a 10% savings on any new subscription at lootcrate.com. Loot Crate is this awesome monthly mystery smorgasbord of a package that you get stuffed with different things from different genres, such as Zelda, Fallout, Harry Potter, and so many more. So to get your 10% savings, make sure you go to trylootcrate.com/paratruth. Again, that's trylootcrate.com/paratruth and enter Bridge 10 to get 10% savings on any new subscription. right, folks. Welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Justin, and I just got done talking to Brandon Massullo about his book, The Ghost Studies. Very awesome guest, very awesome guy. I hope that you check out the book. It's really interesting, and it delves into some stuff that I haven't even researched before. So definitely check it out. I think that you will love it as much as I have. So that wraps up this week's episode. I want you guys to check out paratruthradio.com. We actually have T-shirts on there now, and with Christmas time coming, what better present to give to your special someone than a Paratruth Radio T-shirt, especially if they love our show. And even if they don't love our show, give them one, and it'll spark interest in our show. So I do encourage you guys to check that out. I do want you guys to go check out the different networks we're on now. Paranormal UK Radio Network, TMV Cafe, Fringe Radio Network, as well as radioandpodcast.com. And also check out paranormalforum.net. They definitely have been a huge part of our show from pretty close to the beginning. They've been supporting the show for a long time. And that's about all I've got for you guys. So hopefully the elusive Eric will be back next week, as my special co-hosts last week had mentioned. He's kind of like a cryptid. I'm starting to believe that. So until next week, folks, where you will find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin. Talk to you later, guys.